Okay, so later in this book, we'll see Nehemiah finds favor with the king at the time. He was cupbearer to the king, and he is sent with resources to help rebuild Jerusalem with the king's blessing. So it's one man hearing of the brokenness that has happened to God's people, and he undertakes a monumental task, and God helps him. So I think we can each learn 3 important lessons at least from this text. The first is simple, that we should care for others. If we don't get anything out of this, we should care for others. I mean, think about Nehemiah's position. Nehemiah was cupbearer to the king. That's a high level position. We always think cupbearer, he sipped and made sure that there wasn't poison in the cup and then gave it to the king, right? No, the cupbearer was like in the king's presence all the time. Maybe was counseling, was definitely there as a sounding board. He was with the king and had found favor somehow to elevate to the level of cupbearer. And Nehemiah is 900 miles away, sort of living high on the hog, you could say. He's known by the king. And he is wrecked over the news. He could have simply buried his head and went on about his days. But instead, he mourned. He fasted and he prayed. He mourned and fasted and prayed for 4 days straight. So much so that the king was like, later on, chapter 2, the king goes, we're all partying here and you've got a long face. What's up with that, right? That's kind of displeasing. The king who's providing for the kingdom, and he's walking around with a long face. Like I shared with you, before I was a Christian, I was a criminal. While I was in prison, okay, there were 2 classes of citizen in prison, right? There were those who had a release date and those that didn't have a release date. Those who didn't have a release date, that was their home, okay? Those of us that did have a release date, we were just passing through, okay? And to walk around with a mopey face displeased them. If you were walking around dragging your face, they would be like, pick up your face, dog. You ain't walking around here making the rest of us depressed. If we're smiling and laughing, you better be smiling and laughing, right? Now think about how, and you're like, okay, yes, sir. How much more with a king, right? Who's providing for you, whose palace you're in, who's providing for your family, and to displease a king. You remember in the Joseph story, I think it was a cupbearer, in fact, went to jail next to Joseph, and him and the other guy, they were going to lose their heads, one of them, right, because they had displeased the king. You didn't just do that. But Nehemiah was so wrecked and so cared more about what God thought and what was going on in his heart that he didn't even hesitate. And then, in fact, he was so brave that he told the king, hey, look, my people, they don't got it good right now, and how can I be celebrating? And because he cared enough to just be genuine about it, the king, because of the work of God and the king, put his blessing on him and said, hey, go back and fix your people's homes and take as much money and as much stuff as you need, and hey, when are you going to be back? You tell me, right? Essentially. He cared deeply. How do we care? How do we care? How do we show that we care? What do we do when we care? What should we do? And I almost feel like I am preaching to the choir here, because almost all of you are just really serious Christians devoted in each sphere of your life. But I have to preach nonetheless, right? We care for others through mission trips. We care for others through serving in our church. We care for others through giving of our resources for the church to do the work of the ministry. We care for others by volunteering ourselves to be on committees in our communities. We care for others by raising our children to know the love and teachings of Jesus. We care for others by meeting our neighbors and hearing their stories and inviting them to the barbecue and getting in their lives. We care for others by lending an ear to our coworker. And we care for others by teaching them about Jesus and what he has to say when we have the opportunity. Like Nehemiah, we should care deeply about what's going on with others. Not only that, but, and the biggest thing here, and the thing that I'll talk about now, but we'll circle back to as a take home for us, we're to pray for others. We're to pray for others. Nehemiah went straight to God, verse 4. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. He went straight to God. If this had been a non-Christian movie, a Hollywood movie, I think as soon as he heard the word, we would have saw him grab a sword, jump on a horse, and storm out of the castle. Right? Because what was happening was the neighbors of Jerusalem were coming against God's people. They were holding up traffic. They were stopping things. They were persecuting them. He didn't do that, though. He went to the Lord for 4 days. And then it's not like he even did anything. He just continued to pray. And then the opportunity presented itself because of his genuineness, because of the condition of his heart, because of what he was emulating. The king noticed and sort of forced his hand. This is, I believe, God ordained. Nehemiah knew who had the power to change things, and so do each of us. But we forget sometimes, right? When we go to the God of heaven and earth, we go to the God who has the power to literally make the impossible possible.